Hey guys, how's it going? Kripparrian here. It's been a day, so we got a lot of cards to review, but Rastakhan is full card reveal season, guys. I'm going to review as many cards as I can for you guys. This is up to date as of tonight, but be sure to tune in tomorrow for more card reveals and more card reviews. First up, we have Saronite Taskmaster, a 1-drop 2/3 with the Death Rattle, giving your opponent a taunt minion. People try to compare this to, amazing genius design cards, really, like Zombie Chow. Zombie Chow was an extremely powerful 1-drop that was largely not used by aggro, not even used by a lot of zoo decks because it was such a dead draw in the late game. Saronite Taskmaster, I feel, is a bit worse than Zombie Chow, like quite a bit worse than Zombie Chow, because if you're playing a control deck, you really do not want to give your aggro opponent or your, tempo/zoo opponent any kind of taunt minion to prevent you from trading into his guys in the mid game or in the late game. So, even though, yes, it's about, Zombie Chow level, whatever, when it comes to being used in aggressive decks, when being used against aggressive decks, it is a lot worse. Any kind of 1-drop is going to be pretty decent in Arena, so it's pretty okay in Arena, and I think we might see a little bit of play in Constructed, but just a little bit. I find it difficult to rate this card more than just 2 stars, but who knows? I might be wrong. I mentioned in yesterday's combo-rific combo reveal video of the cards we've seen so far from the Rastakhan expansion. There's some pretty interesting things that you could do with filling your opponent's board up just with useless taunt minions. So there's that angle, but again, generally pretty slim. New Druid card, Predatory Instincts. Draw a beast from your deck and double its health. So it's basically like a preemptive Divine Spirit, but because you can play it the turn before, you can kind of like overload the mana onto the next turn. So, in some ways it's better than just, doubling the health of a card you already have, plus you get the draw effect. It certainly looks like an underwhelming card, but when combined with specific other cards, notably Witchwood Grizzly, it's actually quite good. Witchwood Grizzly is, starts at 24 health instead of 12. So if your opponent has like 4 cards, 20 health taunt minion. So the fact that you do nothing on turn 4, if you're playing a 20 health taunt minion on turn 5, you're generally going to be doing okay, I would say. And cards like, Witchwood Grizzly are actually pretty resilient against silence because sometimes they even gain health when silenced. So it's obviously not a super crazy card. Yes, it can be used in like Hadronox combos and all that, but not really. There's better ways to do that. It's not that crazy of a card. It's just okay, but there's some potential here. I'm going to give it 2 stars. Pretty bad, but not hopelessly bad, and certainly going to have some pretty fun interactions when we play it in Arena. Haunting Visions is a new Shaman card. It is very similar to Primordial Glyph. It's worse in some ways, better in some other ways. The discount that you get is for this turn only, unlike Primordial Glyph, where the discount is preserved and makes you unpredictable for many turns to come. Well, this card gives you the discount that turn only. However, the discount can be applied to other spells. And if you've played a lot of Mage, if you've played a lot of Primordial Glyph, what happens a lot of the time is you have an answer that's relatively efficient for that turn, but you don't know if you should take the risk in playing Primordial Glyph. Like, let's say you have a pretty good board clear that costs 7 mana, you might know what I'm talking about, and, you want to use Primordial Glyph because maybe, like, a Blizzard would be better, but if you use Primordial Glyph and you don't get Blizzard or Flame Strike, you might, totally screw yourself out of a decent turn, so, you kind of take the mediocre option. Haunting Visions actually is favorable in that situation, where if you have a good spell answer, but there hypothetically could be a better spell answer, you can play Haunting Visions without screwing up your play. And that has pretty considerable value, I would say. Haunting Visions is certainly going to be underrated, and, I was trying to think about this card in Arena. Some Shaman spells are just so insanely powerful given the circumstance. I feel this card is actually going to be pretty insane, coupled with the fact that it seems like the Shaman thing, the Shaman low, even though we haven't seen it, we will see the spirit at the end of today's review. It seems to be spell-oriented, And this just seems to be like a pretty powerful spell-oriented spell. Yeah. So I'm going to have to give it 4 stars. I think there is some real hope here. Obviously, not everything Blizzard tries to do for each of the classes is going to work out. So I don't think it's going to be like 5 stars guaranteed see, meta-breaking play. But I think it has a strong chance of making it. I think it has a certainty of being tried by many people when the expansion is launched. So yeah, keep this card in mind, use it as I suggested, and you'll be impressed with the results. Next up, we have Princess Tlani. It's the priest, not Loa legendary, I guess. The leader, I guess they're called. So it's an 8-cost, 7/5 garbage stats, but the battle cry summons all minions from your hand that didn't start in your deck. And this is like another big push for Steel Priest. If you can Thought Steal or something even. If you can Thought Steal a strong minion, you can play Princess Tlani for value, for tempo, for a lot of different things. There's certainly a lot to be seen from this card. Steel Priest has always been kind of like just under the meta. Almost every expansion, honestly, it's been a pretty good deck, but rarely do we see incentives to actually steal cards. And this is one of them. This is certainly a very good direction for the class, as that's something a lot of people have tried and really have wanted to play over the years in Hearthstone. So I'm really glad we have this card. And there is some combo potential. I have seen some people get to work on Reddit and talking about some crazy OTK combos that involve generally killing your own stuff with holy water, setting up a play where you have specific minions from your own deck, but they're not the original ones that started in your deck, being summoned through Princess Tlani, through spell discounts, able to kill your opponent with a series of Mind Blasts and Holy Smites. It's some pretty far-fetched BS combos, but that doesn't mean it won't work in the end. It's certainly a card to keep in mind when it comes to using super powerful combos. There might just be some more priest cards, maybe some more neutral cards that would synergize very well with this, that would actually allow that to happen in a more realistic setting. So certainly a very powerful card. I'm going to have to give it 4 stars once again. Extremely high power level with good chance of seeing constructed play. Probably not meta-breaking level stuff, but still very strong nonetheless. Next up, we have Merlok Tasty Fin. It's a 4-cost 3/2, and the Death Rattle gives you 2 Merloks from your deck. I mean, it's okay. It's like a Merlok and stuff. It's obviously not going to do very much. If you're playing Merloks, you're kind of all in immediately. You're not really playing the long game, and this is certainly the long game. If your opponent is up against a whole bunch of Merloks, they're going to kill the ones in terms of order of priority. They're not going to prioritize killing this one. If you're going to play a Merlok deck, put this in your deck to try to get value, what's going to happen a lot of the time is you're going to run out of cards and your opponent's going to kill this one last. So you're going to run out of cards and have that tempo drop off cliff, and then maybe later draw some more Merloks, but it's probably too late by then. I think this card is absolute garbage in every play mode, and I have no reason to rate it anything but a single star. Not like the worst card ever, not like the new chicken level, but, still pretty hopeless in all formats for the rest of Hearthstone's lifespan, I guess. I don't see this card making it. Overlords Whip, we have a new warrior weapon. It's a 3-cost 2/4. 3-cost 2/4 is actually pretty good. That stat line for a weapon is very strong, especially if you consider the fact that warrior does have ways to buff up these weapons. You put this with a +1/+1, you're going to have a 3-cost 3/5. That's a lot of damage. That's a very powerful weapon. After you play a minion, deal 1 damage to it. It's an ongoing effect. We have seen this through other minions, and honestly, they were completely useless. But at the same time, those minions as a baseline were also completely useless. So I think this card is better, but really the bottom of the usefulness for the other cards with similar effects were so bad that I don't have much faith for this card. It might be played if Blizzard decides to really push Warrior in a direction where it continuously wants to damage its own minions once again, but right now the supporting cards are not there, and I struggle to rate this card any better than 2 stars. I give it 2 stars instead of 1 because the stats on the weapon baseline are pretty damn good, to a point where people might just use it for face damage, but even that I think has a fairly outside chance at this moment. The Druid Spirit, it's a 0/3, it's got stealth for 1 turn, that seems to be consistent throughout every single spirit. It is a very cheap one though, alright? It only costs 1, so you get a 1 cost 0/3 stealth. Just that alone is not too bad. So after your hero attacks and kills a minion, draw a card. So when is this good enough? Probably if you kill 1 thing. So if you kill 1 thing with your hero power, this is probably okay in your deck. So it's okay, it really is. It seems like, because the spirit is generally highly synergistic with the Loa, this seems to be Druid's thing. Druid's thing, this upcoming expansion, is hitting things and killing things with your hero, with damage something. I don't know. That aspect of it seems super garbage to me. However, I feel this card is priced in just right at 1 mana, to a point where I think you could use it just to put it in your deck, get 1 card, maybe 2 cards out of it. It's pretty common that a Druid hero power will kill something throughout the course of a game. Getting that card recycle, having that presence on the board the following turn, essentially giving you some more health because your opponent is going to kill it because he doesn't want a Druid to get more cards. It's not that bad. I'm going to give it 3 stars. I think it's not hopeless. It has an outside chance, but it has a chance of seeing play, not necessarily in a chomper Druid, let's call it, but just an A Druid deck as a pretty efficient way to cycle cards. That's it. Grifter, we got a neutral legendary, 4 cost, 4/5. We got the Yeti treatment. The Battlecry discovers 2 cards and gives 1 to your opponent at random. So that effect is generally going to be pretty weak. You have to consider the fact that, you might be, well, it's an even effect. Your opponent gets 1, and you get 1. It's like, yeah, but not exactly. That's not really how that works, because you're never going to discover 2 cards of equal power level. Okay, not never, but, generally you're not. Generally, 1 of them will be more powerful, which means half the time you're literally giving your opponent an advantage playing this card. Half the time. And there's, very little strategic component there. The main usefulness of this card is to kind of screw up very refined decks. Perhaps someone's playing Res Priest, so if you give them any minion, it's basically a dead card. If they're playing a Mecha'thun deck, giving them any card basically screws up their combo. So there's some hope for this, but really, I doubt it. I'm going to have to give Grifter a solid single star, despite being fairly interesting and probably a little bit better than just that in Arena. It's legendary. Even though it's better than 1 star in Arena, the frequency which you'll see the card in Arena is going to be very low for it to really ever matter. Next up, we have our Canisaur. 6 cost, 3/3 elemental. If you played an elemental last turn, deal 3 damage to all other minions. Which is basically like that 4 cost priest dragon that does the same thing, except it costs 4 and doesn't have a previous turn requirement. Wow, that makes the card look super garbage, doesn't it? Well, let me tell you guys, the priest Dragon board clear is considered one of the craziest cards Priest has ever received. So just because it's significantly worse than that doesn't make it bad. I don't think it's bad. I just don't think it's that great. I think it is largely an arena card. If you see this early in your draft, perhaps you can force out some more elementals so you can actually satisfy the condition, and you basically have yourself another pretty strong board clear. If this card was, in another class, I think it would be a lot better. It's just if you really need a board clear as mage, there are better options. So I can't give the card more than 2 stars. Not hopeless, not abysmal, but really not that good. Don't see much constructed play for this, and fairly limited arena play as well. Next up, we have a Paladin weapon. It's a 5-cost 3/3 with an overkill effect to give a minion in your hand +2/+2. So yeah, it's kind of like a balanced version of a buff your own stuff type of weapon. It's just the overkill requirement will make it so you can't really consider it a 3/3 weapon if you also consider the full value of the effect. What I mean is, if you consider this like a +6/+6 in stats to things in your hand, then it doesn't really have 3 attack. It has at most 2 attack. So would you want a 5-cost 2 attack 3 durability weapon only to hit and kill minions and then get the buff aspect of it? Seems rather weak, but it is an odd card. Something to consider. One of the weaknesses of Odd Paladin is the struggle to really put acceptable quality weapons in the deck. So even though it is a very weak weapon, it has some chance of seeing play because it is one of the main things that Odd Paladin, an existing extremely established deck, is actually lacking. As a result, I give it 3 stars, though not too happy about it. I don't really think we'll see this card very much, but I wouldn't be surprised if we do. Totemic Smash. It is a Shaman direct damage card. It does 2 damage and does not overload you. That's very important. The overkill summons a basic totem. So if you're doing like 1 damage to something, you get to get another totem. And the totems can be pretty interesting. There are some totem synergies out there. We basically had the Totem Shaman archetype pushed to us by Blizzard in the last few expansion, but I would basically say that it was a complete failure to a point where, unless we see further totem synergies from Shaman, the overkill aspect doesn't matter too much. But the fact that it can do 2 damage for 1 mana is good. This card will see play. You're going to want to exit this expansion with a couple of copies of this card. Even though it might not see play this expansion, you have to consider the fact that, spell damage, crazy combo, Malygos-based whatever Shaman decks, they pop up. They pop up every few months, maybe once a year, maybe not at the very top of the meta, but they pop up. And those decks use super crap cards like Frost Shock because there's just nothing better. Those type of decks are in dire need of low mana cost cards that do damage. And this is pretty decent at that, plus it has the added flexibility of potentially stalling out with another totem on the board. So it's not bad. I'd give it 3 stars. I wouldn't be too hopeful for the card breaking any kind of meta anytime soon, but it certainly will help a historically well-established deck through Malygos Shaman at the very least. Grimm Rally is a Warlock card. Destroy a friendly minion and give your minions +1/+1. So in the ideal case, you have a full board of 7 minions. You attack with the 1, you kill it off with Grimm Rally to buff your other 6, and you can basically do 6 extra damage for 1 mana. Is that good? Yeah. That's really good, actually. That's like superb. This is a very good Zoo Warlock card. It is an activator if you need to cube stuff more consistently, though I probably wouldn't bet on that being the primary use for the card. It's certainly very good. Zoo Warlock is one of those decks that just fails to die off. So Zoo Warlock's going to be around. If it's not this expansion, it's certainly going to be the next one. That's about as long as Zoo Warlock has remained dead for, about a 3-4 month cycle. That's it. And I imagine this card will be great in most of those lists, so I think this is going to be at the very least a 4-star card where it's going to push forward an already strong deck. Might even go higher than that, but I always hesitate to call anything game-breaking that fits in a Zoo archetype. Final card today, Spirit of the Frog. It's a 3-cost spirit, same thing, 0/3 stats, stealth for 1 turn. So whenever you cast a spell, you draw a spell from your deck that costs 1 more. This mechanic requires some explanation. If you cast a 0-cost spell, if your deck has a 1-cost spell, you draw 1 of them. If you don't, it stops the cycle. Then you play the 1-cost spell. If your deck has a 2-cost spell, it draws 1 of those. Then it goes to 3, then to 4, then to 5, then to 6. Now, it's a pretty strong draw engine, but it's difficult to really see consistent play from this card. I feel like, yeah, if you play this, it kind of needs to get killed right away, but most of the time when you play this, it'll be difficult to actually start the spell chain, so in most cases, it'll probably be about as good, maybe even a little bit worse than Manatide Totem, and Manatide Totem is generally considered a little bit too slow for decks nowadays. The other aspect is that's a bit of a more positive one. If you're basically out of cards and you have this and like a 1-cost spell, potentially you can string a whole bunch of spells to hit your opponent for an unbelievably large amount of damage. That certainly could happen, and certainly is quite interesting. It can be comboed with the card we previously showed, the Haunted Visions, to reset the counter. So you could play a 1-cost spell, go to 2, have Haunted Visions as your 3, and then discover a spell that costs 0, play that to go back to 1, then to 2, then to 3 to fill out your mana curve some more, if you're trying to do it all in one turn. So is that pretty good? Yeah, it can be pretty good. I think it's maybe slightly above Manatide Totem tier, but again, I feel that's a card that is very marginal in today's Shaman decks, so I'm going to give it 3 stars. Pretty strong card, but I am not too crazy about playing it in my Shaman constructed decks. Let me know what you think. Lots of interesting cards, a lot of debatable cards, I would say, this time around. Hope you guys tune in for the next one, and I'll see you then.